Coach Schuman here with Roy Osing, my newest, latest, and greatest guest on the Success for Life podcast. I'm excited to have you on today. Welcome.
Thank you very much, David. And listen, I'm grateful to have the opportunity. So thanks.
It's we're going to talk about something that I think is probably, if it's not the most important thing in being successful, it's definitely one of the very, very few elite things that can really make a big difference in you being successful in whatever it is you do, but primarily entrepreneurship and business um, and in life. It can really make a big difference if you do it from a positive standpoint, and that's differentiating yourself. And Roy has written a book all about this, so we're going to dive deep into this topic. Before we do, I want Roy, if you could tell us a little bit more about your background educationally, how you got into all this, and how you became an author, and business background.
Yeah. So thanks. Not a very exciting background, quite frankly. I mean, my academic pedigree is a Bachelor of Science with a major in math, and I've never used a differential equation in my life to solve a business problem. But that, notwithstanding that, I've spent basically 4 decades in business. And my story basically is the fact that I had an opportunity at one point in my career to build a business, a new startup in the internet space. And we built it to $1 billion in sales using some really simple, not very complicated things that lit fires in people and spurred them on to do miraculous things in terms of executing a strategy. And so I guess the author piece is kind of like my way of documenting the things that worked in a practical sense, because I'm not a very textbooky guy. I mean, my stuff is founded in good business principles, but I don't espouse theory and formula to basically try and get people to behave a certain way. And so the books, and I've written 7 of them. This latest one, Audacious Unheard of Ways I Took a Startup to $1 billion, is my 7th. And it's just my way of documenting what works for people, paying it forward, and hopefully people will read it and be inspired to try some new things, because we really do need energy around newness, David. We really do, because business today isn't very exciting in my view, and we can talk about that in terms of why I feel that way. And so it brings me to this point of hoping that the kind of experience I had can make a difference to people. And I'm spending an awful lot of time with young professionals and organizations trying to get them out of the sort of stochastic, if you will, textbook approach to business, because it just has to change. And I got a lot of energy for that.
Well, that makes a ton of sense. Before we talk about that, because I really want to dive into, why business is not as exciting, or maybe not as innovative as it should be in some areas. And but I want to dive into, so you started a company that took to billion in sales, a tech company. When was that tech company started? What time frame was that?
Well, I guess it was it was the late 90s, when the internet was just basically beginning, where it was really cool to have a public dial-up service, right? Which sometimes you couldn't even get on. I mean, it was that early in its growth. And the business I worked for was basically a monopoly prior to that, and it was fairly stable. And we literally had to disrupt ourselves around the internet space and try and create some success within that. And I was asked to lead the company, and we basically started. It was early stage. It wasn't brand new because we had data services, okay, but it was very, very early stage. Hadn't had any experience in internet. We literally had to rebuild the culture of the company because it was a voice services business at that time. We had to transpose it into internet space and data space. I mean, we had an engineering dominated culture, and we had to move that and shift it to customer service and marketing. And so we had a huge transformation that we had to go through, while at the same time trying to figure out how to take advantage of the opportunities that the internet offered us. And so I was asked to lead that. And in retrospect, I got to tell you, I got goosebumps right now, man. I mean, I get goosebumps every time I think about what we were able to do from basically scratch in terms of getting the hearts and minds of people wrapped around the opportunity to do things that they didn't even realize they could do before. And yeah, literally building it to beyond $1 billion in sales, which is mind blowing for me.
That's incredible. And what was so it was in data. What was the actual industry segment within technology?
Telecom. It was telecom. And
Telecom.
what we did is basically telecom. Okay. We built the internet business around the expertise that we had in telecom. But as I say, it was largely a voice world before the internet. And so we had to completely change it. And that was a huge challenge. You know, we had to retrain people. We had to redo the culture. We had to exit people. We had all sorts of challenges that we had to do, while at the same time trying to fight off small niche competitors with a lot of constraints that we had at the time imposed by the regulators, because we were a large company at that time in total. And the regulator decided to put a whole bunch of constraints on us, wouldn't allow us to compete the way we wanted to compete. And that added just another layer of complexity.
That's really interesting. So that was during the time, this is when I came out of my MBA program, the late 90s. That was the .com boom. And that was really the boom part of it. I was in tech at that time. I had rose up from being a recent MBA grad, within 3 years making more money than I should have been making at that age, and had way too much leadership role at that age than I probably. Well, of course, at that time you think you deserve it, but you should not have had that much leadership room. But there weren't that many people that had experience in that area, so there was a lot of opportunity, a ton of innovation, like what your company did. You know, making that transition. And then there was obviously I call it a short bust, because I never thought it was going to be a long-term bust, but it was a kind of a reorganization of how tech works, because it was no longer just going to be any .com company that starts puts a .com on the end that was going to succeed. And that was the change that had to wash everything out eventually to get to which the next stage was, where Apple really, climbed, and you had Amazon climb, and they were all really started to boom during that late 90s, early 2000 period. But now obviously are at a whole different state. Same thing with Google, so on and so forth. A lot of the bigger names that everyone now knows. Fast forward to today. So two things I wanted to unpack. One is differentiating yourself first. So what are things that companies or individuals can do to really differentiate themselves in the business field? Because that is I always feel kind of like a tricky subject, right? Too much differentiation, the market may not be ready for it, right? Too little differentiation, then you're just like everybody else. What are some of the important things with respect to differentiating a company or an individual starting something? What needs to be happening there?
Yeah, so that the subject is basically one of the reasons I think, and I've tagged businesses generally, and I know this is a generalization because there's exceptions, as being mediocre. Because it just blows me away that, in spite of the fact that the world today is highly competitive, the fact that customers wield incredibly amounts of power, businesses has basically not moved much along the axis in terms of their ability to differentiate themselves from one another. Let me give you some examples. I call it claptrap. There is so much use of claptrap expressions like "we are better," "we are best," "we're number one," "we're the leader." I mean, you can literally open or look at any web page and you will find claptrap as organizations' way of answering the question, why should you do business with me? Okay, well, first of all, who has the right to say they're best? Who actually is the author of that? How do you prove it? Do people even care about that sort of an expression? My experience is they don't. It's just more noise. There's so much out there. There are companies that say, we provide the best coffee. We work hard. We've been here 100 years. We're in business to save the planet. So we get these statements which are basically claptrap and aspirational driven that mean absolutely nothing to customers who basically want to make a choice, right, in a world with so much competition and so forth. Now, having said that, there is a role for aspirational kinds of statements, right, in terms of creating values in an organization and so forth. But it's not in the way, it's not to be used in the way you're trying to differentiate yourself from the organization. And so we happen to be in a world of claptrap noise right now, and it's been like that for a long time. Now, having said that, there is a solution, and I had to work very, very hard to create my own solution. Okay, and it's called the only statement. If you go on my website and look at my blogs, I've been blogging since 2009. And the only statement has got a huge part of that because it's my way of cutting through that clutter. Only statement is really simple. It says, we are the only ones that. We are the only ones who. Okay? So it doesn't use claptrap. It uses the word only, which is a binary word. It either exists or it doesn't exist. It's easy to prove, et cetera, et cetera. So I had to create a whole process for organizations to actually create an only statement for themselves. Now, it's not easy to do. And there's a lot of people that will say, well, but Roy, we're not unique at anything. Well, the reality is they are. We just need to discover it, right? And discover it in a way that is actually compelling and makes sense to what their customers care about. Like, there's no sense being the only at something if your customers don't care about what you're the only at. And there's a lot of businesses, unfortunately, that try only that way, and they end up making that mistake. Okay, so can you have too much differentiation? No, you can't. And the reason for that is the only statement is built around what people care about. So if you do that, okay, the more differentiation you have around what they crave, the better off you are. The harder it is for people to copy you. The longer you will be successful with your only statement, but eventually you'll have to move and change it because that's the way the world works, okay? And so I'm just imploring people, get the hell away from better, best, superlatives, comparatives. Number one, we work hard, we're stronger, doesn't mean anything. Try the only statement. I'll help you with it. It's the only way out of this, David, the only way out of this.
It's incredibly interesting how the only statement, and I'm trying to think about this in the right way. So this basically separates you as this is what you do that nobody else does. This is or what you care about that no one else can match, right? So that only statement is something that you then build the whole vision around. Is that kind of the thought process of it?
So the only statement is created within what I call my strategic game planning process. So I had to reinvent the planning process when I took over this business as well, because traditional planning, it's too cumbersome. It takes too long. It's way too expensive, and it doesn't focus on execution. Okay, so there's no use having a plan if you can't execute it. I have no time for plans that are theoretically pristine and yet you can't execute through human beings. What is the point, right? So I had to create what I call a strategic game plan. And very, very quickly, I'm going to get to your question. The strategic game plan is created by answering three questions. The first question is, how big do you want to be? Okay, that's a question about revenue growth, top line revenue growth. If you're at 50 million annually, where do you want to be in 24 months? Do you want to be at 100? Do you want to be at 500? It makes a difference because the growth objective you have determines the risk and character of the strategy you have. And this is completely the opposite way to the way most people do planning. They look at the numbers after they've created a plan. The problem with that is if you don't like the numbers, you change the numbers and you don't change the plan, okay, which is nonsensical. So you start out with the numbers. Second question is, who do you want to serve? It basically says, where are you going to get the money? Who are the target customer groups you want? Which customers have the latent demand potential to deliver you the revenue growth, okay? Third question, how are you going to compete and win? That's where the only statement comes in. Now, really, really important. The only statement does not deal with the market. It deals with who you want to serve. And so if you have one customer group, say for simplicity, that you decide you're going to target, the only statement addresses what that target market cares about, not the market in general. And this is a huge mistake a lot of companies make. They have target groups, and yet they issue these helium-filled statements that address the world about what makes them special. Well, you can't have it both ways. To be relevant and compelling, you must speak to your target customers, nobody else. And that's where you create the only statement, is around them, okay? Given the other competitive alternatives that that group have. If you're able to do that, man, it is powerful. It's powerful, it's focused, and people love it because it's execution oriented.
Is that part of the issue that we have now in business, is that people aren't creating these kind of statements that differentiate themselves? And is there a lack of innovation? Is it too much follow me, or follow on strategies that are being used?
Absolutely. And it is a thank you for lobbing me the one on benchmarking and copying, because I happen to be a guy that has absolutely zero tolerance for copycats, particularly the people that copy others under the guise of innovation. Well, I'm sorry. If I copy you, how do I have the right to say I'm being innovative and creative? And yet, many, I will say most organizations, they benchmark best in class and they try and copy them. And then they say they're being innovative. Now, 2 points. Yes, benchmarking and copying for, say, things like operations practices and tactics like that has some merit. But the problem is people are now using it, organizations are now using benchmarking for strategic purposes, copying somebody else's strategy. Okay, well, you can't do that. If you want to be unique and special in the world, you can't copy somebody else's strategy. It's got to be yours. You have to, and that's one of the things that I drive home when I deal with seminars and that around my strategic game planning process. It's like, forget benchmarking. And I've written a lot of articles. My favorite is benchmarking sucks. And it does. Okay. You really have to be, and I'm being really hard on it just to make the point. You got to get out of the copying thing. Benchmarking stultifies innovation and creativity. It does. You can't be creative if you're copying somebody. And there's way too much of that going on. And to a large extent, it's driving sort of the inability of a lot of organizations to differentiate themselves, as you suggested. You're right.
And then it becomes, my other question is there I'll use, for example, like Elon Musk, obviously I'm assuming he's what we would call an innovator, right? He's creating some things out of thin air. And he's not completely, but he's patented some different things. And then you see, I would say, this race to, outer space, right? Between him and Bezos and, a couple other people, I think Virgin Airlines CEO and our founder. My question is, when you follow in that capacity, Elon says he wants to go to outer space. Then the two other billionaires said they want to go to outer space shortly after that, right? They all do it in some capacity. The question then becomes, like, who has the lead advantage, right? The first mover advantage. And then is there a strategy on innovation on top of something that's being done already? Is there some level of innovation on that? And how does that work? Like, almost like I guess you would say maybe some sort of second mover type of thing, differentiating.
Well, interesting example. First of all, the race to space is a fairly small market, right? You don't have a million people all trying to get in that game. So you're dealing with something that maybe one or two people involved. And so there's a lot of room to build on copying. So I wouldn't necessarily say that, gee, these guys copying the quest for space is a bad thing. But the winner will not be the one with that vision. The winner will be the one that actually does it. And so the innovation comes within, how do I do it? Okay. And there's plenty of room for that. Okay, there's plenty of room for somebody to say, okay, I align with that vision. Okay, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to beat your pants off in terms of how I execute it, and I'm going to win based on execution, not the vision, because the vision is ethereal. Okay, we got to get beyond that. It's not about what you aspire to do. It's what you actually get done. That's the important thing. And unfortunately, in today's world, pick up a textbook, my friend. You got an MBA, pick it up. What do they say? They talk about rules and formulas and predictive models. And I'm not saying that they're not important. They play a role. But what's missing is the same amount of precision and drive and attention to actually executing on that stuff. Why is that? It's because that's the hard part, because that involves human beings. That involves their biasness, their behavior, and how they want to be treated. And there's no formula for that, in spite of the HR guys, right? There's no formula. I had to figure out my own way how to light fires in people. And that's how I described my leadership style. It was get in the trenches with the front line, convince them that what we're doing, what we wanting to do is right, and ask for their help and light some fires in their passion in the right side of their hemisphere, not their logic, to go along for the ride. And I got to tell you, it works. It's so simple. There's a thing out there that says if it's not complicated, it can't be right. Well, I'm not a very complicated dude, right? But what I've discovered is it's the simple things that actually get things done, not the complicated things. They're just too difficult for people to wrap their heads and, more importantly, their hearts around. And so I'm segue into execution, which is a huge part of differentiation. It is huge because I got no tolerance for somebody that says, well, I intend to do this, and then they stop. It's like there's a period after that, right? So I want to see, where's the beef, right? I want to see what the hell are you going to do differently to make that, to breathe life into that. That's the important thing. Not enough of that going on.
That's a great point. Well, I think I point to, Bill Gates basically stole the operating system, but that he executed on that vision that Xerox failed to execute on, IBM failed to execute on, and he executed on it. I mean, he enhanced it here and there in different ways, but they built the main components to it, and he executed on. He executed on a sales strategy. He executed on operational strategy. He executed on what the product was about that was different than. They couldn't figure it out, what was different, and he figured it out. I think that's one interesting thing about it. Where are the Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos of this generation? And I think that it's an interesting generational question, because I think about when I was younger and also when you were younger, being a rebel meant going against the grain. A lot of the kids now think being a rebel is joining the corporation, right? I mean, and you know what I'm talking about. So it's like, oh, let me get my Nike shoes. Let me get my, let me get my brand name stuff, right? So it's very hard if you're a younger person and this has been jammed down your throat by, in some cases, the original innovators, right? They built these corporations now, and now they need workers, right? They need more and more workers. And the people who would become innovators on larger scale, they have become a lot of times more small business. And there's nothing wrong with it. I'm a small business owner myself, but I don't see this scale and the ability to take that step from a lot of younger innovators that I saw. And you remember being in the thick of this, when Bill Gates, was having these and Steve Jobs were having these conferences, just releasing different versions of things that 40 years ago people would have laughed at, as because that's no way that's exciting. People were going nuts for it. And I don't see as much of that anymore. It's still Bezos. It's still Bill Gates. It's still Google. They're the ones still releasing it 20 years later. What is going on there?
Well, I don't know. Look at there's very unlikely that we're going to see people of that stature as a norm on a going forward basis. There's not too many superstars in terms of the business area, and for me, that they're at the far end of the distribution curve. They don't have to be convinced. They're always going to be super performers, right? And there's also going to be people at the other end that are going to be non-performers. The majority of us are in the bulge of that Bell distribution curve. I think if we can move that bulk 5 points towards Steve Jobs, just 5, can you imagine the power that that would unleash in business, in the environment, in the economy, in employee development? Because that 5-point move of the glut of the population of people in business would be hugely productive. And so that's where I think we need to spend our time. Apply the pedantics to move people away from what they've learned in school. Because I believe, to answer one of the questions you asked, because there's many in there, people find it really, really difficult to move out of academia because they've been taught to follow the rules. They've been taught to apply the formulas. They've been taught not to stand out. They've been taught not to be different. Okay. And well, young people, when they're told that, I mean, most of them will try their best to conform, but that's not what we need. I mean, Steve Jobs did write about here's to the crazy ones. And the basic message was you need to hire the people that stand out, that push back, that are contrarian, just like the guy that owns the Heart Attack Grill in Las Vegas. And we can talk about that in a minute if you want. Wonderful business model, right? Selling triple bypass burgers. Whoa. I mean, that's a big deal, right? But we don't encourage people to sell triple bypass burgers, right? Because we ask them to conform to health standards and everything else. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but it sure as hell isn't creative. It doesn't stimulate the creative juices. I'm critical of how we're educating young people these days, because they come to me with the belief that applying case study results to my problems are going to make me successful as their leader, and it doesn't work, right? So my eyes glaze over and I just say, well, do you love humans? And they don't know what the hell to do with that question. They don't understand how important that question is to getting results, right? And so I ended up coming up with something I call Hire for Goosebumps, all based on rap. You know, I hired people that gave me goosebumps about a story they would tell me about how much they love people. And the reason that was strategic is because that's all about execution. You can't execute a game plan if you don't like people, because it ain't technology that implements a strategy, man.
Right. Terms like out of the box, which were overused 25 years ago, right? I don't even hear it anymore. You know, I don't ever hear out of the box thinking. It's like, no, we stay within the box. And I think a lot of it, has to do with trying to get everybody to conform to the same thought process and same value system.
See, that's the problem. They do that under the guise of scaling. Okay. So if I want to scale a business, I need 1 million cogs all doing the same thing. Now, the problem is the cog is a human. Okay. So what you do is you suck the life out of the human, make them a cog, so you believe you can scale a business. The reality is it doesn't work, because when you suck the humanity out of your organization, what the hell do you have left? You got a bunch of, it's almost like an apocalypse, right? You got a bunch of zombies running around with no blood. You need to figure out a way to mass produce creativity. And the only way I've been able to do that is one person at a time. Allow them the freedom to do what they know how to do. As a servant leader, ask them, how can I help, and deliver on the results, and just keep doing it. I mean, one of the questions I keep getting asked is, Roy, you talk about audacious leadership. What the hell is that? And why don't we have more? Well, I'll tell you, one of the reasons we don't have them is because people don't like pain. Pain is a strategic concept to me. If you're not willing to go down a path and absorb the pain, you'll never be an audacious leader, because it's hard work. If you don't want to get your fingernails dirty, don't bother going down the journey. If you don't have audaciousness running in your bloodstream and DNA, if you don't really believe it, you'll never do it, and you'll get called out as a phony. So my problem is guys like Gates, guys like Bezos, they had it in their veins and they expressed it a certain way. We need to figure out on a larger scale how to actually do that with more and more people who are today hell-bent on conforming. And the only way that's going to happen is for conversations like we're having, okay, to touch people, to offer ourselves as help, right? Convince them that it's a journey to go on, be there for them, and encourage them along the way. That's the only way it's going to happen. You can't write. I mean, I hope my book gives people some ideas, okay, but it's not gonna mass produce nonconformance, and yet that's what we need. So we're into it for a long haul, my friend. We just got to
Yeah,
keep
no,
banging away at this stuff.
I think there's some interesting. I mean, you brought up a ton of amazing points. I'm trying to pack this in the right way. One of the things that I think is really, really difficult is that individuals, and I think social media has a large part in this. And I use social media to build my business, so it's not like a bashing of social media, but I think is a large part of this. If you step out of a norm on any topic, right, you're going to get more negative comments than you are positive. But most people will then change their thinking slightly because of the fact that they want to have less negative comments. They're almost shooting for, because of the way things are, like a more positive comments than negative, and at worst a 50-50 to keep them along the line. And all that does is gives them zero, growth from that standpoint. They may have that thought and then they won't execute on it. Instead of encourage someone to think differently, our predisposition from the people who control the norm is to bash that, right? Is to bash that outside the box thinking instead of saying, "Well, why do they think about this? What is the reason? What are your valid points? You may have valid points." And that's a large part of it. And the other thing I think that is really interesting, and maybe you could shed light on this. Why do people come up with thought, like who work in corporate, and they say, "I can't do this. I've been doing this job for 10 years and I have, I'd love to do this, this, and this." And then they would give people like me a tip, want to give me a tip and consult with me. And I say, "Well, you've never started a business. You don't know what it's like to take your profit that you just made, that most people would say, okay, I'm going on vacation with that, and reinvest it because you're looking to build," right? People don't understand how difficult that is, and that is painful. And it's a never-ending process. So then you may become wildly successful. And yes, for some people there is an actual great exit, but some other business owners will do that all the way through and take a certain amount of money and reinvest the rest and deal with that pain over and over again for building the overall product. Where do we get people to start to take that step when they think, maybe I shouldn't be doing this? Is not, instead of just saying, "You know what, I'm just going to plug along until retirement," and the retirement comes and you get sick, right? And you don't get to enjoy retirement. I love when people say it. "I'm going to retire one day." Okay, well then you're going to have, hopefully you have 10 to 15 years, maybe you have 2. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, first of all, going back to your social media thing there, it's always curious to me. I'm always asked my opinion about somebody's social media strategy, and I would always say I have no clue. And the reason I say that is unless I understand the strategy behind it, I have no right to comment on what you're doing on social media. Okay, because all you're going to get is my personal opinion. And so a lot of the people that get commentary back have an ill thought through strategy driving their social media activities. Okay, like for example, if you're after a customer segment A, for example, on Instagram, and from other people you're getting a bunch of negative comments, well, who gives a shit? Okay, the point is you need to give a shit about the people that you're speaking to. And there's all this noise around. That's fine. Let the noise happen. Take care of the people you're targeting, is what I say. Stay laser focused on those people and let the trolls do what they're going to do. because they're always going to do. Because if you start chasing, I call it yummy. If you start chasing yummy all over the place, you basically run out of bandwidth, steam, money, emotional energy, and you die. It's as simple as that. Okay. Now going to the second issue, well, what the hell's going on with people? Look at, everybody has their own definition of where they want to be when they grow up, right? So somebody that wants to be a cog, fine. Let them do that, because we need cogs. And by the way, cog is a Seth Godin term. My marketing guru, mentor for years and years and years, most brilliant marketer. Go check out his books. He talks about cogs. So people want to do that. That's fine. Our objective, though, should be for those people that don't want to do that, to create an environment, right, and a future past so that they can succeed. Because those are the ones in that bulk, okay, that bulk in the distribution curve that we want to move 5 places towards Bezos, 5 spots towards the way that Steve Jobs operated. So that's what we want to do. So in many respects, it's a matter of categorizing people in the right way, and actually discovering what they need to take the step forward. And that was a big part of what I call leadership by serving around. Okay, that was my brand. Leadership by serving. It's not a style of leadership. Leadership by serving, which a lot of people talk about, leadership by serving around was my way of executing better, by taking care of people better, by asking them, how can I help? By moving them along that innovation curve. And you have to do that. It's hard work, and you can't delegate it. I'd get criticized for micromanaging, and I'd say, thank you very much. You just recognize the biggest part of my job is to take care of people, and I can't delegate that. Anyways, so, people will be what they want. Let's find the people that want to do the things that we're talking about, and let's lavish them with praise and educate them and take care of them and give them what they want. Get rid of the problems and the crap in the organization that's preventing them from doing their job. That's what we should be doing as audacious leaders, in my view.
Understanding that everybody's an individual, and understanding that their goals will ultimately help your organization succeed. And you know what? It's one of the things, like, if someone from your organization goes and invents something and they go off on their own, you are as much of a hero for helping them along that process as they are the hero for creating it. And that's the thing. And then more people will ask that person, where did you learn those skills? Oh, I worked for so-and-so and I learned those skills. So now you'll get another person like that coming to work for you with that same ability. And I think you're dead on. The more we can treat people as individuals, to understand what drives them, and to get the most out of them, and to foster it to that individual. I love that, micromanaging the individual, not on what they're doing, but on what can help them to become more successful. And I think that's the key thing. Right. This has been fascinating. I'd like to have you on again. Unfortunately, the clock sometimes
love to be
ticks.
Here. Love it.
Love it. Tell everybody where they can find you, how they can reach you, and go from there.
Yeah, so I have a website, of course, bedifferentorbedead.com, and come visit me. I've tried to provide as many resources on my website as I can. I blog every week, David. So every Monday there's a new blog. Come and subscribe, and you'll see I got blogs going all the way back to 2009 on my stuff. And it's just my way of continuing to bang away at this. I enrich the content. I learn more about my stuff every day, every time I'm working with it. So you can check that out. I got a page on my books. So I've written 7 books. The latest one's there, so you can get information on that. And the other thing is I got an email address. It's roy.osing@gmail.com. And I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody on this journey and help them. I mean, I get emails practically every day since I've particularly been doing the podcast saying, hey, Roy, here's my draft only statement. What do you think? Oh, awesome, man. That's the greatest thing, to now engage with an individual on their only statement. And it's my way of course, it's free. I mean, this is my way of paying it forward. And so I help people, and that's picking up. So by all means, one-on-one conversations with me, I'm more than happy to participate.
All right. Thank you so much. This has absolutely been a pleasure. I learned a ton today, and I hope everybody else did. This is exactly the point of the Success for Life podcast, to have people who have done it, been in the field, and really climbed the mountaintop to be able to share their ideas with others to help them become successful. Thanks again for being on, and best of luck with the future.
Thank you, David. And again, my pleasure. And thanks for having me on.
You're welcome.